I don't think squirreling away money is a good idea in a divorce. I think the better thing to do is to sit down with your spouse and say, look, it's not working. We have some assets. Let's just split them up. You take this, I'll take that. I don't think hiding assets is ethical. Now, can I say anything about it? Nope. I can't talk about it. And while I might advise you against doing something, my job is to help my client.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the TPM Show. I am joined by a very special guest today, Brian Boyd. Brian is not only a litigator, a lawyer, but also an expert in tax. And in fact, I'm going to let Brian explain what he does, and we'll talk a little bit about how we connected.
Well, Ian, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. So a little bit about me. I'm a lawyer. I graduated from Sanford University's Cumberland School of Law in 2004. Then I went to tax school at Georgetown, graduating there in 2005. I worked in D.C. For Ernst & Young in their corporate tax group, and then found my way back home to Tennessee. I'm a native of Tennessee. My parents are natives. Their parents are natives. So we go back a little bit. And so now I live in Franklin, Tennessee, which is just south of Nashville. It's a suburb. I'm a partner at the law firm of Thompson and Burton, and I'm in the corporate group, but like only one other partner in the firm, I stand in two worlds. I litigate, and I also transact, which is unusual for most attorneys. Typically, most attorneys pick one or the other. And just the way my practice evolved over the years, I do both. And I prefer the transactional, but if it's an established client, I will litigate for that client. I've litigated with the Department of Justice over tax issues. Business disputes all the time. In fact, I've got one on my desk right now, and that's what I do. But my passion, in the practice of law is helping business owners and, individuals save on taxes, structure themselves in a tax efficient manner, create a strategy for moving forward for asset protection and wealth growth. And, that's what I do. I've got a social media following on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. But, on the day-to-day stuff, I'm our tax guy here in the corporate group. So last week I was looking at unrelated business income tax. We have a client, he's a billionaire, and he's going to be spending $140 million. And we had to figure out, all right, what's that going to look like from a tax standpoint? And how do we make sure, one, it's tax efficient? Two, do we have the right structure in place? And three, are we complying with all the rules of the SEC and the IRS? So there are a lot of components that go into what I do, but I've got great partners around me. We all play our part in helping clients. And, recently we just launched what we call GC in a box, General Counsel in a box. And it's a flat rate. It replaces your general counsel. We charge a flat rate. It's a bespoke program for individuals and small businesses and even larger businesses. Typically 200 million and below, we'll work with them and say, hey, for this amount of money, we basically replace your general counsel. And I was talking to a client or a buddy who's now becoming a client who runs a firearms company. And he was telling me what he pays his GC and that his GC is leaving. And I was like, wow, well, for like a quarter of that, we will not bill you beyond your flat rate. And you have unlimited hours with us, and we cover everything. And there's a litany of just items that we cover. Anything outside that, we'll bill our hourly rate. For example, litigation. We have to bill our hourly rate for litigation. But, everything from contract review to tax advice to, intellectual property, we're billing a flat rate for it. And that's really going a long way to helping, some small businesses save, but also have the access they need. So we're available at any time. A client can say, hey, can you have a call today at 4? And I'm like, okay, yeah, one of us will get on the phone with you and we'll talk with you and let's work it out. So, that's kind of what I do on a day-to-day basis. I'm a real estate investor. I'm an author. I do speaking engagements and seminars. And so, that's kind of how I try to help with, what I do, bringing it out to everybody and making it more of a populist movement as opposed to an elitist movement where most people can't afford, a tax attorney, especially given the way, hourly rates have increased. And, that's just part of the market and you have to stay relevant and you have to stay, on top of things. But we offer that service at a lower rate for people, only because we think it's important that everybody have, you know, good information, good structuring, and we shouldn't outprice the market for most people. So that's our goal.
I love it. And we were talking a little bit offline. You're also a father, a husband, and an avid outdoorsman as well. And a lot of our guys can relate to that in hearing it. And as you know, all guys are all businessmen who are married or have gone through their relationship woes, and also fathers.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a 13-year-old boy, and I started taking him into the field with me when he was about 6. So we have bird dogs, we have chocolate labs, and like I said, I love to be outside. I love to bird hunt. South Dakota this time of the year it's freezing, but it's great for birds. If you're a pheasant hunter, and then I deer hunt last year. I took my family to Patagonia, and we went on a red stag hunt and we brought back some nice trophies. But the most excited I was watching my at the time 12-year-old son shoot a red stag 200 yards uphill with a right to left wind and drop it. And I was ecstatic, and he was like, not a big deal. And I'm like, dude, that's incredible. Good for you. He's small, so I was like, this is incredible, buddy. And he's just like, eh. And I was like, dude, you have no idea what you just did. So, and he shot a 30-06, and my son at the time was under 100 pounds, and that's a good kick on that. And I was like, wow, good for you. So, yeah, avid outdoorsman, fly fishing, hunting, whether it's big game, small game. Uh, I actually have a deer camera in my neighborhood. I've been feeding deer for over a year now, and one of the HOA people came up to me the other day and like, can we talk to you? I was like, nope, you can't. And I know what they were going to say. They're like, what are you doing? It's like, well, it's none of your business. It's not on your property. So, yeah, I'm not hunting in the neighborhood. If anybody's worried about that, I'm not hunting in the neighborhood, but I am watching, you know, deer because I'm just fascinated with that. And so, it's just, I love being outside. My wife fly fishes with me. She's got a better rhythm than I do. Um, so we have fly fished Patagonia. We fly fished Montana because we're out there so much. Colorado, Vermont, here in Tennessee, we've got some great fly fishing here, and we are a family that enjoys being outdoors together. So it's a big part of our life and the way we live. We eat game meat all the time, so elk chili, deer chili, that's a big part of life for us. So yeah, we're big into the outdoors.
Love it. You're making me hungry. We're getting closer to lunchtime over here, so I'll be looking forward to it. And one of the interesting things we were also talking about offline is the way that you and I connected. One of my, kind of tempting things, I guess, one of my vices when I put the kids to bed, and sometimes my son, who's 7, gets a little scared, so he wants dad in the room. So I'll sit in a chair and I'll go through TikToks. And I ran across one of yours, and I thought it was really interesting. We were talking about how one of your clients is buying, I think it was a city at the time or a town. And then I went down the Brian rabbit hole, and you have a lot of great content you're putting out there for people, from haunted houses to to solid information, giving people legal and I wouldn't say advice, but legal information and tax information that makes it approachable to the average person.
Yeah. And, so much of what we do on a regular basis, everybody thinks about lawyers and they think that we're stuffy and um, that's one misconception. But on the other side of the spectrum, you have people that think that lawyers are Harvey Specter from Suits, right? That this is what we're like. And that's not true. We have a lot of good information. We have a lot of fun stories. And I'm just trying to relate it because so much of what I do on a regular basis, especially in my day-to-day life, it's like, hey, people will actually benefit from this. I did one recently, some video, and I don't even know if my social media manager has put it out yet, but you know, I'm just talking about what you can do by year end if you're a W-2 or even a small business owner to save on taxes, because I would rather pay myself now and reap the benefits of that from a tax standpoint than to pay that to the IRS. And, you know, just a quick little like, hey, fund your retirement account, or, you can pay your children. And, if you're a small business, you can do that. And if you really want to set them up in life, you can pay them up to the standard deduction amount. And then you take that money that you've paid them and put it into like a Roth IRA and put it into an index fund and just let it go. And you do that every year. By the time your kids in their 40s, they're going to be millionaires because you funded this, at the beginning. I also did another video that I was literally walking out of the gym and it's like 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, you know what? I just paid this premium on my insurance policies. Let me tell people about what I do with life insurance. And so you have all the people come out of the woodwork like, oh, well, that's a bad investment. It's like, it's not an investment, it's life insurance. And so when my son was 3 months old, I bought him a whole life policy and I put $600 a month into that. Now, that's a lot for a lot of people, but my goal in life was to say, hey, I'm going to fund this. And when it's time for you to go off to college, I'm just going to borrow money from that policy, pay your student or pay your tuition, and then I'll pay it back as a loan. And then upon his graduation from college, it'll be fully funded again. And I'll just hand it to him like, hey, this is yours. Here's your start in life. I funded it. You can cash it out. You can keep it. You do whatever you want with it, but this paid for your college. And this is going to be your start in life. That's just one of the things that most people don't understand. And the reason I like life insurance is one, it's super safe. It's just really safe. It's not subject to the volatility of the stock market. Two, there's a death benefit that's tax free to the beneficiaries of that. And four, you can borrow against it if you want to. You don't have to pay it back if you don't want to, as long as it's funded up to a certain amount. And you can turbocharge it with all these riders that you can get, like paid up addition riders and things like that. And I'm sure there's some insurance agent out there that can speak much more intelligently about it than I can. But I love that kind of stuff, and I think we should share it. Like, I've been very blessed in life. I have a good life. I have a great family, and this information will just help other people. And so I'm not doing it because I'm an insurance agent. I'm the last thing from an insurance agent. I don't make anything from it. So, I'm just trying to pass on tidbits here and there that I think a lot of people can benefit from. And, that's how I look at social media is that, all right, well, how can we help everybody else? Now, don't get me wrong. I love watching dog videos, and I love, watching that shot on that deer from 300 yards away. I love all that. But, for me, I use social media to try to educate people like, hey, I'm not the guy for this, but go talk to an insurance agent and see what's right for you. If you've got small kids, go do this. Even if it's $50, $100, $200 a month, do it.
I love it. I pay my children as well because they show up in our ads. They show up, come here to the ranch. We live, about 10 minutes away from here in our property, but we come here to the ranch and they work. They clean up stuff and they work. And I do something very similar. And ironically, I was talking about whole life insurance with somebody last night, and there isn't a lot of information out there for the average person to disseminate what's true, what's not. You have somebody on social media selling this, infinite banking system, with whole life insurance. And of course they're selling.
I do it. I do it. I use infinite banking. And so, and just to explain to your listeners what infinite banking is, within these policies, there's a cash component that just grows. And, depending on how much you put in, how long you've had the policy, what kind of riders you have on it will determine how fast it grows. But like my wife and I are heavily invested in real estate, heavily invested. And, if there's a deal out there, we want to move fast. And so what we'll do is like, all right, well, I'll borrow, $100,000 out of a life insurance policy and we'll just go buy that property. We'll just pay cash for it. And then, we'll refinance it with 30, 90 days out and I'll pay back the life insurance policy. And so that's how we use it. And I'm paying premiums every month. So it's building itself back up. And, it prevents me from having to go to the bank and borrow from the bank because even though the insurance policy has an interest component that I need to pay back, I don't have to pay it back if I don't want to. As long as the policy is funded to a certain level and it can sustain its value, I don't have to pay it back. Now I do pay it back, but that's just me. And that's how the infinite banking system works. And a lot of people out there, and you can even talk to people in Wall Street, life insurance is, a lot of people will say, oh, it's not an investment. I'm like, it actually is an investment. It gives me a rate of return. It's safe. It's like a high interest savings account that's tied to the market. And especially if you have a universal life policy that is tied to certain indices, that's how you can use it. So we do that. We utilize life insurance quite a bit in our investing life. So I just think more people should know about it. And maybe it's not for you, but at least now you know.
Well, and again, that's something I think that you're doing a great job of. And while we're talking, is you're putting that out there to the world and just sharing information with people. And as funny as it is, as soon as I mentioned to some of the members that are involved in our community that you and I were talking, I sent you this. One guy sent me a text right away, like, no way. He's like, I see him on social media and I'm interested in actually working with Brian.
Well, that's great. And, I'm willing to work with anybody as long as we don't have a conflict. And, yeah, I mean, that's what I want to do because I really enjoy doing structure work and telling people, hey, well, let's do this instead. And, let's see what it looks like on your tax return in a year from now. And so many people are like, oh, that's great. And you show them how to do certain things like, why don't I know about it? I'm like, well, I mean, like anything in the law, like you didn't go to law school, so there's no reason you should know about it. Don't kick yourself over it. Like that's what we're here for. Um, but I do find, especially in the tax world, there aren't enough strategists out there. And a lot of people go to CPAs and are like, well, why didn't you tell me this? That's not a CPA's job. That's not what CPAs do. CPAs basically take history, everything you did this year, they take that history and they put it into the right boxes and they file that return. That's what they do. That is their job to comply with the law and the tax code. Strategists, and there are a lot of them on social media, and I'll give a shout out to a few of them. There's Carlton Dennis, there's Mr. Tax Write-Off, there's Mark West he's out in West Tennessee. He's got this thing called Mark's Money Secrets, and he does a great job. We've talked a couple of times, and he's just trying to bring a populist message to what a lot of people think is, oh, I can't afford that level of service. I'm like, yeah, you can. You need to pick up the nuggets along the way, and that's what we're doing. And I really enjoy working with people. Now I do have to make a living doing it, but I do. I do enjoy structuring things and helping people grow their wealth, preserve their wealth, And, I like to see them succeed. I want everybody to make money. I'm a capitalist. I want everybody to make money. And I think we're about to enter into a really good few years here where there's going to be a lot of opportunity for a lot of people to make money. There really is, especially with some of the proposals that are coming down through the new administration. You're going to see, some really nice benefits for small business owners.
What kind of benefits are you seeing or predicting?
So, there's going to be the Section 168K bonus depreciation. Both sides of the aisle want it to go back to 100%. Currently, it's 60%. Next year, it goes to 40. And then in 2027, it's gone completely. Well, that was part of the 2017 Tax Act. And it allows you to depreciate personal property up to 100%. The goal is to bring it back to 100%. And I think under the new administration, you're going to see that be made permanent because it spurs growth. And when you spur growth, you allow businesses to keep more of their money because you're giving them a deduction for spending money. And that in turn allows them to reinvest in their business, which grows the business. And that's what we all want everybody to do. I want everybody to have a successful business. And just things like Section 168K, which is bonus depreciation, it's definitely coming back. I also think, there's going to be a push to lower the capital gains rate. I think there's going to be a push to lower the corporate rate. And it's going to be interesting to see what unrelated business income tax happens to that because that's currently at 21%. I'm wondering if that doesn't get tied to the corporate rate and drop down, or even tied to the cap gains rate and drop down. So those are things that are coming down the road for everybody. But your average business person doesn't know because they're not watching it. In fact, yesterday, um, a court in Texas ruled that the FinCEN requirement, which is a requirement that everybody with a 5% interest in an entity has to disclose who they are. And you have to show your driver's license. You have to get a special number. And if you don't do it, there's a $500 a day penalty for not doing it. And that goes into effect on January 1. So everybody's rushing to get all these businesses registered with FinCEN, which is actually the Department of Treasury. And a federal judge in Texas yesterday said it's unconstitutional. There's a moratorium on it. This is no good right now until we figure this out. So that's big news. But your average person probably doesn't know about that. And they're jumping through hoops trying to get everything registered because who wants a $500 a day penalty? So anyway, those are just kind of some of the things that we like to pass along to clients. Like, hey, don't do it. Don't worry about it. You don't have to pay for it. We're good. But if you're not a lawyer, you probably don't know.
What are some other things that you're seeing for business owners, small or large, that they're missing? What are some common mistakes you're seeing them make?
How they're structured. So what do I mean by structure? Well, when most people set up a business and, so many people are guilty of this, they'll go to LegalZoom and just get the state form, which is what LegalZoom sells. They sell you the state form and then they fill it out for you and that's it. And then you get a tax ID number and you go set up a bank account and people think that's a business. And well, no, that's the start of a business. Nobody's talking to you about your tax structure. Like, if you set up an LLC, are you a sole proprietor? Are you a partnership? Are you taxed as an S corp? Are you taxed as a C corp? People aren't asking those questions. And there's a big problem out there because when they come to see me, I'm like, well, who set this up? Did you talk to them about what your tax category is? And they're like, no, I just went on LegalZoom or whatever entity is out there and I did this. I'm like, okay, why? Why did you choose this? Why didn't you choose a corporation, or why didn't you choose an S corp, or why didn't you choose a partnership? Why didn't you make those decisions? Like, well, I didn't know. Okay, fair. You didn't know, but now we've got these tax issues coming on and we need to figure this out and we need to see if we can make it retroactive if possible, if they've gotten to me fast enough. So a lot of the problems I see when people come to me with, oh, I've got a business. What do I need to do? I'm like, well, let's figure out your tax structure. Um, so we do that. And then we've come up with a lot of different structures that not only save you on taxes, but save you on liability. We before we came on live, we were talking about Wyoming and how I love Wyoming for setting up entities over there, and I've got my reasons for it. And I've done a few videos on separate states, like I did Montana, I did Wyoming, I did Delaware and Nevada. But I like Wyoming. And people ask, well, why do you like it so much? I like it because it's a no tax state. So you're not paying taxes personally to the state of Wyoming, which you're a refugee of California. And I know that if set up an LLC in California, you still have to remit taxes back to California for that, irrespective if you're there or not. And I'm like, well, Wyoming doesn't do that. So there's no personal income tax there. There's no corporate income tax there. They have charging order protections, which has to do with if you have a judgment against you. Wyoming, it's in their statute. They say, we're not going to compel anybody to make a distribution out of their LLC to pay a judgment to somebody else. And that's a big deal. Like if you get sued, Wyoming basically says, you don't have to pay that out of this. We're not going to do that. Also, I like the low cost of administrating an LLC in Wyoming, and the laws there. It's very, very, very business friendly. Probably more so than Delaware. It's very business friendly. So I like Wyoming for those reasons. And it's just easy to use. Like Wyoming has made it so simple. And a lot of people don't understand that Wyoming's on the cutting edge of LLC law. Like it's not Delaware. It's never been Delaware. It's always been Wyoming. And the states follow Wyoming. They don't follow Delaware. Delaware makes really good corporate law. That's great because they have a chancery court up there that is only there for corporate law. But Wyoming's where things are being done.
Yeah, I have 3 entities in Wyoming, so uh, I'm a big fan myself as well. So we have structuring, and I have so many questions as you're talking. Um, but what I want to go back to is you made an observation that I thought was really it's not talked about very much, which is instead of getting your taxes done, everybody's clamoring to get their taxes done. But what about the tax strategy, especially for business owners? And a lot of our guys, they're investing in real estate. They have multiple businesses they're working on. What's the difference? And this is going to sound basic, but break it down for the listeners, the basics between their bookkeeper, their accountant, and somebody like yourself.
I think there's a big misunderstanding out there about what tax lawyers do. Yeah, we research issues, we figure out how does this look, but our goal, our job is to make sure that we're being tax efficient. What does that mean? Well, I've got a partner here that likes to call it slippage. Like you're losing money through taxes. And we make sure, lawyers make sure that you're set up in such a way that I can call your CPA and say, hey, this is what we're doing. This is what the plan is over the next 4 months. Let's sit down and have a conversation about what this needs to look like and what the goal of doing this is. So when it comes time to prepare your tax return, they understand why things moved in a certain way. So you talked about clients or listeners doing real estate. Well, you have 1031 exchanges, you have 721 upreach, you have DSTs, you have the slow man's 1031. You have a lot of different mechanisms to use, but you got to know how to move the money. And if you're not booking it right, and this is where a bookkeeper comes in, you got to have a conversation with the bookkeeper. You're like, hey, this part is principal, this part is interest, this part is repaying a loan. This is what we're putting into the qualified intermediary to hold the money. Make sure you pull all these pieces apart so we book it right. So we all have our own parts to play. I would say a really good bookkeeper, worth their weight in gold, worth their weight in gold. And you need to find one, you need to use one, and then you need to have an accountant, whether it's an enrolled agent, a CPA, or even a tax attorney that may be doing tax returns. I don't do tax returns, but, and then they all need to talk, because when you're talking about a CPA, a bookkeeper, and a tax lawyer, we're basically talking about your money. We're talking about all your money. You need to have a team to handle your money. And that's our goal, is to the tax strategist, the tax attorney, is the one that's basically saying, okay, let's move it in this way so we have this result at the end of the 12 months. Whereas your CPA, if you don't keep them in the loop, they're just looking at numbers provided by a bookkeeper and putting that on paper and filing it and hoping you're not getting audited, because they don't know. They haven't been clued in. So the attorney and the CPA, or the enrolled agent or the accountant and the bookkeeper, we all have conversations. And that's to move you from point A all the way to point Z throughout your financial life. And by utilizing us in the way in which we're meant to be used, we can achieve great successes. I equate it to like trying to hit a deer with a rifle at 400 yards by shooting a shotgun. You gotta have the right tools. You've got to use that rifle. You've got to, shotguns are great for birds within 60 yards, but I mean, I'm not going to try to shoot a deer with a shotgun at 400 yards. So use the tools for what they're meant to be used for. And that's all we are, is we're the ones that are coming up with an idea. We're speaking to your accountant. We're talking to you. We're figuring out, okay, what is your goal? And that's how I talk to all my clients. I'm like, what is your goal? What is your 3, 5, 7, 9, and 12-year goal? I want to know where you want to be along that range, and let's put a plan in place to get you there. So unfortunately, CPAs have taken it on the chin because they're so busy trying to figure out what you did to put it on paper right. But the lawyers, if we're talking to your CPAs, we're saying, hey, this is why we're doing this. This is the goal, and this is what I want to see. And if you talk to your CPAs, and they're smart people, they know, okay, well, I need to make sure that we book it this way. Let me talk to the bookkeeper to make it sure it's going down on paper like this. So that's how we're different. And I think it's important to have all of those people on your team.
Gotcha. And one of the questions I get often from business guys is, what's the best way, let's do that in air quotes on purpose, to structure my company or companies? Do I need a holding company? Is that something that you typically would sit down and work out and architect for them based on their goals?
Yeah, and you can't see it because my whiteboard's over there, but I whiteboard all the time. I think you mentioned something the other day, like, or before we got on live, about the structure I did, and I made a video of it, the client buying the city, right? And, you know, I don't know if you can see this, I am constantly structuring things. And like I said, I'm a pen and paper guy. So like, even on this page, there's a little structure down here. I was taking notes and I was structuring it out while I was talking. And by structuring things using holdcos, holding companies, trusts, and management companies, we're able to create efficiencies throughout. So imagine it this way. Let's say you have a company. We're going to use easy numbers here. So people in the comments, don't worry about the numbers. Let's say you have a business that makes $100,000 a year. Okay, great. Pay yourself a regular salary or a reasonable salary after you make a 2553 election to an S Corp. So you have pass through treatment of the profits and losses. You're going to pay yourself $50,000, and you're going to pay self-employment tax on that. At the end of the year, you're then going to dividend out the remaining $50,000. But by issuing a dividend, you're not paying self-employment tax. So you've saved yourself some money, especially in taxes, by issuing the dividend. Well, we have to tell people how to do this and show it to them. And we talk to their CPAs and their bookkeepers and like, this is how it's going to work. And this is the salary and this is what he's going to do. And, so that's kind of how the structuring works, is that we're creating all these structures, not only for liability protection, but for efficiency. So you're still getting the 100,000, right? You're still taking that home. But I just saved you all the self-employment tax that you otherwise would have paid if you had taken the whole 100,000 as a salary instead of 50 as a salary and 50 as a dividend. So those are kind of the things that we show people. It's like, look, you're getting the same amount of money, right? Why don't I just do it this way? Another thing we do is I really like to bring spouses into closely held structures. Here's why. Let's say you are a CEO of a company, you're doing really well, um, and you're paying yourself. Again, I'm using easy numbers, $100,000, but you're making 200 a year, and you could put your spouse on payroll, pay her a reasonable salary, and then dividend out to her, and then dividend out to you. You're getting the same amount of money coming home, but you're paying less in taxes. And you're also benefiting your spouse, because I like to use SEPs, simplified employee pensions, because you can put away up to 20% of $345,000. And this year that is $69,000. And if you're over 50, you can put away another $7,500. So if you have two people on payroll, you're stacking cash for retirement into a SEP that you can control. And people just don't think this way. Now, you might think that way. I think this way. Financial planners think this way, but we're trained to think this way. If you are really good at making widgets, you should focus on making widgets. Leave this kind of thing to people like me. We will figure this out. We will talk to your other people and we'll put this together. But you need to focus on making as many widgets, the best widgets as possible. And so that's how structuring works. We're here to make sure you're taking the greatest advantage of the tax code as possible without triggering audits, without crossing the line, with doing things ethically, but also to benefit yourself. And that's what we do on a regular basis.
I love it. A lot of our guys that listen to this have international businesses as well. They're U.S. citizens or maybe Canadian, and I've talked about a couple of those questions for you. But are there better, I assume, better ways for us guys in the States, as an example, to bring in money overseas?
Yeah, there are, in fact. So you're talking about cross-border transactions, and we had two partners go to Japan to do a seminar, or to attend a week-long seminar, and they actually ended up teaching some of these law firms out of London, the UAE, Dubai, um, Japan, Germany, all these other countries out there, South Africa. Um, hey, this is how we're doing this, and this is why we're doing this. And by utilizing this structure that we've put in place, you can bring in outside money, you can make outside investments. And not only is it going to protect you, but it makes your life so much easier, because, quite frankly, we've figured it out. We spent the time to dig into this. We've spoken to our colleagues overseas. This is how they're using it. We put a little twist on it. And, suddenly we have this structure that works very well. Now, I'm not going to tell anybody about it right here, but yeah, we do that. We do that. They're called cross-border transactions. We just did one out of Costa Rica. We've got another one out of Japan going on right now. We've got one in Canada going on, and the idea is to provide the tax efficiencies that they're available to you here in the States by utilizing these structures that make your life so much easier.
Awesome. And, I talked to you about this a little bit, Brian, is, again, when I posted into our community that I'd be speaking to you, one of the guys said, well, crap, I've been, fudging with my taxes for a couple of years. It's keeping me up at night. Is that something that's worthwhile going back and correcting, or just hoping the IRS doesn't swoop in later on and figure it out?
Yeah, and that's a great question. So here's what I would say to people that may have misstated things on their tax return. Um, if you can amend within the 3 year period and that year hasn't closed, like you can go back three. And as long as that year's not an audit or not being audited, just go ahead and amend it, make it right. Look, you don't want to go through a tax audit. Nobody enjoys that. Um, Tax audits, I've defended them. I've actually been through one, and they're a pain in the ass. Um, I want people to take what they can take legally and ethically. Sometimes those two things don't converge, but I want you to take what you can. I want you to pay as little as you have to, and I want you to sleep well at night knowing you're not going to get audited. You haven't done anything crazy here. And I think that's absolutely necessary for people, for our listeners right now, to say, hey, I didn't declare that $10,000 that year that somebody 1099 me. They go declare it. Like, just amend it, restate it, declare it, get it over with, sleep better at night. It's not worth it. Your health is something that's really important to you, and sleep's part of that. 10 grand, dude, come on, go declare it. So that's my advice to people. Like, hey, don't fudge. Like, you don't need to do that.
Do you run across in your practice? Do you run across? I got to imagine that you deal with very aggressive business people who at times want to push the limits. How do you handle something like that?
Yeah. So when that happens, and it happens more than you think, they're like, oh, I don't want to pay any taxes. I'm like, okay, well, guess what? You live in the United States. You're going to pay property tax. You're going to pay sales tax. You're going to pay gas tax. You're going to pay liquor tax. You're going to pay cigarette tax. Like, there are taxes everywhere, man. You can't just not pay tax. So they're like, well, no, no, no. I just don't want to pay, the IRS. I'm like, okay, well, do you have a business? Yes, I've got a business. Okay, do you have employees? Yes. Well, you're already paying Uncle Sam. They're getting their portion of the employment tax every month. Every month they get it. So you're paying them one way or the other. Now, I understand you don't want to pay personal income tax. I get that. And there are ways to reduce that. But zero, outside of being a real estate professional, I really don't know of a lot of ways to offset income. And like I said, I'm a big proponent of real estate. I've got quite a bit of real estate. Now, it's been very good to me. Like, we just got a tax return the other day, or a tax refund, and it was $61,000. That's through real estate. And a lot of people are like, "Oh, well, you overpaid." No, I didn't. I didn't overpay. I didn't pay that year because I just got all that money. And that's everything my wife paid plus some. So, we are utilizing the tax code in such a way that, yeah, I mean, we're going to pay as we go, but we're going to get it back in a refund. I just think it's unrealistic sometimes for people to say a good tax attorney or a good CPA or a good bookkeeper will keep me from paying taxes. No, no, that's not true. We can only do what we can do. Like, we don't make these facts. We just deal with these facts. But there is a way to minimize your taxes. And that's all I'm talking about doing. And when I tell, like, aggressive clients, I'm like, look, let us take a look and see what we can do. And if you're happy with that, we'll move forward. But I promise you, zero tax unless you're heavily involved in real estate as a real estate professional. It's probably not likely. And I'm just trying to be candid with everybody listening. It's probably not likely.
Because I know a lot of our guys they're aggressive businessmen, right? And they're looking for loopholes or ways of going around that. If they come to you, kind of like you come to another lawyer or a therapist and said, "Hey, Brian, I've been doing this for 4 years. I've been skirting this thing. It's 200 grand a year I'm putting aside." At what point do you have to say something to someone else, or because where I'm coming from is a lot of our men are struggling in their marriage. And some of them are going, okay, I might be getting divorced. So they start to squirrel money away. I see this happen all the time. Move things here, move things there, just in case. When it comes to what you do in the tax frame, you know, I know a lot of these guys because I've gotten to know them really well. They can be very skittish about what they share. And with a professional like yourself, I got to imagine they have to share everything. Otherwise, you can't really help them.
Yeah, I've got some very wealthy clients, and I've got some clients that are just barely getting by. And what I say is like, what I tell them is like, look, right or wrong, it doesn't matter. I just need to know the facts. I need to know what happened or what you did or what's going on. Because unless I see the full picture, I can't help you. And, we have this client that was buying the city, and he's actually an attorney. And he's a hedge fund manager. But the point remains, he's like, look, I'm going to tell you everything just so you know what to do. I'm like, that's fine. And he tells me things. I'm like, okay, well, I'm glad you told me that, because that changes the way I look at this structure, or I look at being able to do something. That makes it very different for me. And he said, look, you can't help me unless I am completely honest with you. And he's right. I can't. Because if something comes out of the woodwork 2, 3, 4 years down the road, and I'm like, well, I didn't know anything about that. Otherwise, I would have planned for it. And, I think it's very important, even if you're going through a divorce out there. Look, guys, I've been through a divorce worth every penny. But I will tell you that starting over is not the worst thing in the world. Giving half to your spouse, okay. Especially if you have kids. I don't have any qualms about it. If my wife and I got divorced today, I'm like, honey, take the real estate, take all of it. I want you and my son to be taken care of. Take all of it. You know, Life's too short to worry about how much I have. I've got a lot. I've got a wife I love. I've got a son I adore. I've got a good career. A divorce, yeah, that would be personally devastating. But I'm I do everything I do for my family. So if you want to be selfish going through a divorce, it's going to bite you in the butt, because a judge is going to see it, and they're going to change it. Um, I don't think squirreling away money is a good idea in a divorce. I think the better thing to do is to sit down with your spouse and say, look, it's not working. We have some assets. Let's just split them up. You take this, I'll take that. I don't think hiding assets is ethical. Now, can I say anything about it? Nope. So I don't have an obligation to go to anybody and tell them anything. In fact, I can't, because you tell me something, I can't speak a word of it. I can't talk about it. And while I might advise you against doing something, my job is to help my client.
Hey guys, sorry to interrupt this episode, but the reality is if you are watching or listening to this right now, then you are looking to better yourself. And I applaud you. You're one of my people. And I want to give you the opportunity of taking massive action. So if you haven't joined the activation method yet, it's our flagship program. Do what thousands of other businessmen just like you have done and take action. Be one of the 1%ers that actually does the work and takes action. There'll be a link in the description that'll take you right to a page that'll just give you more information. There is no obligation. Just go check it out and see if it's a good fit for you. All right, let's get back to this episode.
And if my clients' goals and desires diverge from what I think is ethical, I need to say, hey, I don't agree with this. I'll help you do it, but I don't agree with it. But you understand the ramifications of doing this, right? Because if this blows back on you, don't turn around and say, I told you not to do this or told you to do this. I'm telling you now, you need to understand the risks. But I have no obligation to go to any authorities or anybody like that. I think the only ethical obligation I have is if I know if somebody's going to be in imminent danger, only then can I go and talk to somebody about it. But yeah, I mean, that's the double-edged sword of being a lawyer. We know so much, but even if we ethically don't agree with you, we can't say anything about it. Now, I do tell clients, hey, let's not do it that way, or let's try another way. Let's figure something else out.
Sure, you're guiding them. You're giving them their advice as an advisor.
Yeah, I'm being a counselor at that point. So, but yeah, I mean, no, I know there are a lot of guys going through divorces out there. I've been through a divorce. I've done it. It was worth every penny. But I was a lot younger, and it just wasn't great. So yeah, I mean, just get through it and move on, because I have a wife that I adore. She's beautiful. She's funny. I have a great time with her. And we have a lovely child, and we've got a good family, and things get better, people. So to your listeners out there that are going through a divorce, dude, it's just a page in your book, man. Just turn that page and move on. It's just a page.
Love it. Love it. Well, Brian, like I said, we have a few questions that guys sent in, and one of them you kind of touched on a little bit, and I'm just going to read it as it was written to me, if that's okay. You talked about real estate, and one person said, me and two of my partners have been buying, renovating, and renting multi-units. I have struggled to designate myself as a, quote, real estate professional like my two real estate agent partners do. This allows them to get much better tax treatment than I get. I would imagine a lot of people who do this as a side gig. I did have a question around this, and if there are any creative ways to accomplish it. So I think what he's looking for is, hey, at what point do I call myself a real estate professional?
Real estate professional status is controlled by Section 469 of the tax code. And Section 469 basically says all real estate is passive unless you spend 750 hours a year operating in real estate. That 750 hours a year is more than what you spend from other sources of deriving your income. So if you are a W-2 employee for a company, the IRS presumes you work between 1,800 and 2,000 hours a year for that employee or employer. So you would have to spend 2,001 hours in real estate to achieve real estate professional status. Is there a shortcut to this? No, there's not, because the IRS audits that. You need to keep a log of all your time and everything you did every day in real estate. Now, I will tell you, if you do that, if your goal is just to achieve the 750 hours a year, that's about 13 hours and change a week. Okay. I promise you, I spend more than that every week in real estate. Do I spend more than that now that I'm at a law firm and, I'm not running my own firm? I'm just a partner at a firm. I am not going to achieve real estate professional status this year. It's not going to happen. I'm looking at my hours since I got to this firm in May, and yeah, there's no way. I'm working 12 hours a day, and I'm not going to do it. I'm going to lose my real estate professional status this year. It just is what it is, man. I've had a good run. It's fine. But no, there is no shortcut to it, and please don't try to take one. Now, alternatively, under Treasury Regulation 1.469-1TE32A, which is the short-term rental loophole, you can spend 100 hours a year managing your short-term rentals. Managing. That means you manage it. That doesn't mean you go and get a property manager, because as soon as you get that property manager, none of this matters, because you're not going to be able to achieve what you're looking to achieve. But you can unlock those tax benefits through real estate if you can do that. And it only requires 100 hours of management a year. What does that mean? What does it mean to manage real estate? It means you're handling the booking, the banking, you're coordinating the maintenance people, you're coordinating the cleaners. You're managing that property. But there's a phase out. It phases out at $150,000. So if you make more than $150,000, this isn't going to help you because it phases out. So if your goal is to be a real estate professional status, you need to jump into real estate or just buy more real estate. You'd be surprised. Like, we have 20 properties. And this morning before we came to work, we're sitting there talking about who's paid their rent. Have we fixed that outlet at that property? And then I was on the phone with my financial planner this morning. I'm like, hey, we're thinking about selling. What kind of vehicles do you have that we could 1031 into? So, all of that kind of aggregates together. So I probably spent, an hour and 15 minutes on real estate today. My wife is probably spending some time on it today. In fact, I know she is. So it all adds up, but there's no shortcut to it. There's no way around it. You have to do the work.
Got it. Yeah. Everybody wants the shortcut. I want the pill. Well, this guy goes on to say also, and his question is, we've also started to take on investor money, and we have looked at just taking on straight debt. This seemingly allows us to have all the depreciation flow to only us three, which we like. We have weighted this against taking in straightforward investor equity money. Would be interested to know the pros and cons here, and any of those don't know what I don't know that Brian might have.
Okay, well, he's talking about a capital stack. So he was talking about doing a syndicated deal where he brings on investor money and then they raise a certain amount and then they finance the rest of the capital stack through mezzanine financing or through a debt, right? So even a loan from a bank would be necessary. But then he turns the conversation to, oh, my partners and I were now taking on debt. Well, you're only going to be able to take the debt to the extent of your capital account. So let's unlock that a little bit. What does that mean? It means if you've got a $4 million loss in the first year, let's say it's like a $100 million deal, and you got a $4 million loss through depreciation or whatever, and depreciation is not a loss, it's a deduction, but you're trying to offset your income through that. And you've only put in $100,000. You've got a problem. Your capital account is $100,000 and you're trying to take a $1 million or $4 million loss. It's not possible. You need to figure out how to increase your capital account. So what I would advise him to do is, hey, let's get your accountant on the phone. Let's start pulling this deal apart and modeling out what you want to see. I had this phone call yesterday with a client down in New Orleans, and he's a lawyer and his brother's a real estate attorney. So it was me, his brother, his CPA, and his bookkeeper, and we were all there like pulling this apart and trying to make the model comport with what we needed to do. And I got to tell you, man, it is not an easy thing to do. Like, there were 3 lawyers on the phone, 2 accountants. Like, we're working hard to figure this out. So there's no quick answer to your listener's question. It really is fact intensive of how we do this and how we can make it work. But if he wants to take on debt, I would be cautious of, one, make sure your capital account is fully funded to the amount that you want to take in debt or take in deductions. But also, is there a way to personally guarantee the debt where you can strap that debt to your capital account? And so you may have put in $100,000 of cash, but now that you're obligated on that debt, that could increase your capital account. And so I know we're getting into tax and we're starting to like kind of geek out here, but it's really important if you're wanting to take those kind of deductions, on a deal like this. We just did a deal 2 weeks ago, client out of Texas. is buying into a syndication here, and he's a $25 million buy-in. And so we had to make sure that we were modeling out, what does this look like? When are you going to actually start receiving returns on this money? It's $25 million. It's a $280 million deal. And, it's like, all right, well, in year 3, you should be getting X amount of dollars if this pro forma performs like we think it's going to. So there's a lot to go into when you're talking about capital stacks and, syndication deals, especially in real estate. But there's no quick answer to your listener. I just have to see the numbers. We have to pull it apart. We have to work on it. And we're going to be on the phone with your CPA. We are absolutely going to be on the phone with your CPA, figuring this out, because I don't crunch numbers. I can tell you what I think is going to happen, but I need the CPA to model it out.
Gotcha. Here's another one around funding that probably is going to be similar in terms of you needing to know more information, but I'll throw it out there. This is from Jeff. He says, I'm curious to know, when financing a project, how much is too much? My largest land purchase was just over $150 million. It was not my most profitable deal. I no longer use outside funding. I only take on outside investors when I cannot fully fund the jobs. Interest rates play a big part whenever I look on funding. Curious to know Brian's template to funding.
So what we do here at the firm, we're a heavy real estate investing firm. We have, I think, 50, 55 lawyers, and our commercial real estate group is like 20. So most of the firm is involved in real estate. When it comes to funding, especially at the rates that are going on right now, we're turning clients onto family offices. By using family office money and giving them a slice of the deal, we're getting cheaper capital, right? Because if you go the traditional route of a bank, even if it's a Goldman Sachs or a JP or something like that, or even a BlackRock, you're going to pay what we like to call a VIG. Like you're going to pay for it. But if you go to like family office money, they really control what they're doing. They control the interest rate. They don't have to go through these levels of oversight because they're getting in on the deal. I would encourage you to look at family office money. There's so much out there. And quite frankly, you can't beat what they're offering. So they might give you a 5% rate, but they want 10% of the profits on the exit. Okay. For 5% now to build out a project? Heck yeah. Yeah, I mean, you definitely can't get a construction loan on that rate. So we try to use our synergies between all of our clients. We've got a pretty good base of clients. I've got a client now, brilliant guy, West Point grad, MIT for business school, and was a helicopter pilot in the Army. And he ended up going to work for, one of the guys that was featured in that movie, Too Big to Fail. And I'll just throw his name out there. Greg is my client, and Greg is a great guy. And he came to me a few months ago and was like, "Hey, I've partnered up with a buddy from business school, and this is an idea we have. What do you think about it?" And so I got on the phone with him. We started talking through it, and he's like, he's explaining it to me. I'm like, "Oh, that's really elegant. I like that." And, they have access to capital that is unheard of, and they're tapping family offices. And I was like, that's incredible. And he was explaining this project he had and the structure he was using. And we're utilizing that structure on a couple of things now. And yeah, there's just so much out there. So to your listeners, his name Jeff, I believe. Jeff. Jeff, dude, we tap into other clients and say, "Hey, we've got a client coming in the door. This is what they're interested in. Why don't we put you two together? See if you guys can work something out. And if you can, well, we're happy to do the deal. We need waivers from everybody, but we're happy to do the deal. But we just want you to succeed. And that's where there's no template to it. It's just using the relationships we have to get cheaper money in the door.
That's awesome. And this brings up a side question for me that I know I get from a lot of guys is you have guys like Greg, right, who are what I'll say playing at a higher level than the average Joe, so to speak. Is there a difference in mentality that you see, Brian, or any from somebody who's thinking small, like someone who's I want to open a business on Main Street, USA, versus somebody like Greg that's taking a bigger swing at the bat?
Yeah, and it's a difference in understanding money, and it's a difference in understanding what can be done. So when you're dealing with like a Main Street business, right? Like Acme company on Main Street that sells widgets. They're looking to make a living. They're making to create a job for themselves. When you're starting to deal with high finance and sophisticated business people, you're seeing how they're looking at money and deploying that money. And there's a difference. They're not looking to create a job. They're looking to take their earpods and make it 50 earpods. Whereas if you're dealing with somebody on Main Street, they're like, oh, I just don't want to pay as much in taxes. I want to be able to retire at 65. I want to move to Florida, get a house on the beach, and, live out my golden years listening to Jimmy Buffett. Great. But if you want to get into the world of understanding how money works and how your money should work for you, not you working for your money, then somebody like Greg he's a dream because he understands, hey, I can make X and that's fine, but I'm going to create X infinite by deploying money into this. And there's the difference is that Greg's not looking for a job. And here's the difference I will tell people is that, so I go all over the world. I hunt. I'm a member of a club up in New York, and I hang out with a lot of Wall Streeters. And if you ask those guys to a person, how much money do you make? They couldn't tell you. They have no idea, no clue. And I think if people get away from the idea of pegging success to a certain dollar amount and just let the dollars work, you'd be surprised at how far you can get in life. So, I remember when I was in my early 20s and I thought making $30,000 was a lot of money. And I was like, if I could just make $30,000 the rest of my life, I'll be perfectly fine. That's how stupid I was in my 20s. But the people that are truly successful aren't worried about nickel and diming everything right now, because I am of the opinion, hey, I want everybody to make money and I will pay my way as I go. I've got no problems doing that. And then you see people, they're like, well, I don't want to pay that. I'm like, well, okay, you don't have to, and I won't do the work. It's fine. I don't, no skin off my back. I've got other things to do. It's deer season, by the way. I'm gone. So, point remains is if you stop obsessing about how much you make, you'll make more. You really will. And that's where Greg's mentality is that he's like, okay, so I have a base of this. All right, all my bills are paid. We're fine. And by letting go of the rat race mentality of, oh, I need a 3% raise or I need a 5% raise, you stop worrying about how much money you make, you'll make a whole lot more because you're not thinking about it. And that's where Greg's mentality is just different than everybody else. He's like, yeah, I can make X amount of dollars on salary, but at the end, I want to have $50 million in the bank. And that's how you get there, because he's not creating a job. He's creating an environment where his money's working for him. And I think that's the difference between Main Street and high finance, is that they're looking at money as a tool, and people on Main Street look at it as a necessity.
Are there resources for the Main Street guy to go out there and learn about how to deploy money?
It's hit or miss, but you get onto podcasts. Like I listen to a podcast every Tuesday. It's called the REI Real Estate Podcast for CPAs or something like that. And every Tuesday they come out and we're only talking about taxes and we're talking about how to move things, and it's just fascinating to me. Now that's where I'm kind of geeking out on you, but you need to start listening to people that do this on a regular basis. There's a podcast out there called Bigger Pockets, right? And if you're involved in real estate investing, I'm sure you've heard of Bigger Pockets. They're great. They have a 30-minute podcast. It is the same format every single time, and it just tells stories about people who have done something different to achieve success. And that's great. But what you need to do is go talk to the people that are on the podcast, not the podcast. Go talk to the people that they bring onto the podcast and see how are they doing it? What are they doing? And you will open up your world and realize that, oh, my view's been here where it should be here. And it's out there. And I say it's in front of us all the time because I listen to podcasts all the time. I mean, this is going to be a podcast. And you have to go to the people that are doing the things that are going to help you. And yeah, you're going to kiss a few frogs. You are. It's just part of it. Can I tell you how many CPAs I've been through? I've been through like 5. And, the first one, just wasn't up to the task. It was too complicated. The second one missed a $50,000 payment I made to the IRS. I caught it. I'm like, well, I'm not going to pay you for fixing your problem. Another one, just didn't file my personal self-employment tax. And that was a $30,000 problem. And then, the other one just flaked out. I mean, I've got a really good one now, but it took a lot of time. But look at all the frogs I kissed along the way. And so I tell people, like, go to the people that know what you don't know. And the only way to know what you don't know is you need to educate yourself. You need to listen to podcasts like this. You need to listen to Bigger Pockets. You need to listen to, seminars out there. I do seminars every now and again, and people call me invariably from those seminars like, hey, I want to sit down and talk to you. And I'm like, okay, what are we talking about? And they're like, well, I've got all this real estate and I want you to work with me. And then you kind of get into it. I'm like, okay, well, I'm glad you came to the seminar and let's work with you. And they're like, I didn't know you could do that. I'm like, well, nobody knows you can do that because it's just not talked about. So what I would tell your listeners is that there are ways to increase your toolbox, the size of your toolbox, but you've got to go out and talk to people that they're going to be the tools in the toolbox.
Gotcha. Get out there, network, talk to people who are in the trenches actually doing the work itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, much like anything in life, you don't know what you don't know if you haven't been exposed to it, right? I mean, just go talk to people.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me. When I was in my 20s, I was lucky enough to be surrounded by a lot of wealthy and wise people, and somebody who at that time I had 3 companies. One of them was a private training studio, right? So it's where people who are out of shape go to get back in shape because they spent all their time, making money. And one guy came up to me and said, "The reason I come to you is just like I go to my dentist. I know I need to eat less and work out, but I don't do my own dentistry. I don't try to do it myself. I come to an expert to get the advice and things that I need." And it's similar with something like we talk about wealth building or tax strategies. I think often as businessmen, myself included, we kind of think that we can just figure it out. And it's much more complicated.
I have a lot of clients and I'm like, hey, I've got this other client. You need to talk to them. Like, y'all need to go to lunch and talk about this. You could help each other. And one of the things I think our generation, your generation and mine, I'm Gen X, and I think, and this may not go over well on your podcast, I think men need to be men. I think we need each other. I think we need our tribe. I think we need to be able to lean on each other and work together. And what I found is the most successful relationships I have are when I was vulnerable with my friends. And even in business, that's the same thing. Like, I would much rather do a deal with my buddy than I would with somebody I don't know. I've got a buddy, came to me. He's now a good friend. He came to me in like 2013 or something. He had sold a business and he was killing it, man. He was killing it, but he didn't pay his taxes. And so I was able to hold off the IRS for 11 years over the stupid tax bill he just refused to deal with. And so I now invest in one of his businesses. I'm one of the owners of one of his businesses because I've seen how he works. And we're friends. Like, his name is Joe, and Joe will call me. Like yesterday, he called me. He's like, "Hey, I need you to do this." I'm like, "No problem." But I would much rather give Joe some money to invest in a business than some rando that I don't know anything about. Like, Joe was in the Marines. I was in the Marines. We love to shoot the shit about it. He's got a son off to college this year. He's got another one going in 2 years. And Joe can stub his toe and make money. And I don't know how he does it. But he does it. And I'm like, well, dude. So we set this business up a couple of years ago, and it's going to make $2.5 million this year. And, clearly that's not all profit. But I've made back the entire investment that I put into that company in 2 years. And, from here on out, it's a dividend check for me every year. And I'm like, great, I can use that. But it's by working with a friend and not working with a random person. And I think men, we need our friends. We need our tribe. It's why I do Jiu Jitsu. It's very humbling. It doesn't matter how good of an athlete you are. There's always somebody better. And I was a good athlete in high school and even through my 20s. But it's something else to go out there and have a girl kick your ass. It really is. And believe me, it's happened. So, I just think there's something necessary for men to be men. And I would rather be partners with a buddy than I would with a random person, because it's also going to generate synergy, right? He's going to introduce me to another friend. We might be friends. And then suddenly he might have a business deal and we're doing business there. So, I just say that, and I don't know how that's going to play with your audience, but I just say that to tell you that I would rather work with friends than I would with people I don't know.
I think it's going to play really well. I mean, we call our 1-year membership group the Brotherhood. And it's for that reason. The men come, they work through their stuff. They're growing. Like I said, we work with businessmen, and that's our bread and butter, the guys that come through this movement that we have. And as I told you before, we've hit over 1 million downloads of this particular show alone. So the men out there are looking for those answers that you're talking about.
Well, if I could encourage your listeners to, hey, call your buddy up, go have lunch, have a breakfast once a week. Like, I try to see one of my friends a week, and yeah, I'm busy. I'm at the office a lot, and then I just want to go home and hang out with my family. But like, next week, I'm gonna have breakfast at 7:15 in the morning with a buddy who's at another law firm, and I love this guy. Like, he's great. He's so smart, and he's always got things going on, and he's super humble. And then I've got another buddy that I talk to as much as possible. He's a judge, and he was my big brother in the fraternity, and we're just having a blast with this last election. Just like, did you see this nominee? What'd you think about that? And it's not something I can do with even some of my law partners that I see 12 hours a day every day. We have that connection, and I think men need that connection. And so it goes a step further when they come to me and they're like, "Hey, I've got a problem." I'm like, "All right, what's going on? How can I help?" It's like JD. JD got me into Jiu Jitsu 5 years ago, and it's his fault. I need a shoulder replacement now. But JD's going through something legally, and he texted me last night at 8:00. "Hey, can we talk?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'll call you first thing in the morning when I leave the house. We'll talk." So on the drive into the office today, we were talking, and he was like, all right, this is what's going on. I'm like, okay, all right, I got it. Let me call your attorney. Let me walk through it with them. Let's figure it out. I'm there for you, man. And JD also got me into hunting. Like, and that's another story. But he was like, "You're working too much. You're wound up. You're way too tight." And he was right. I was. He took me turkey hunting. I've never looked back. I have never looked back. I probably have too many shotguns. Well, you can never have too many, right? But yeah, I mean, he got me into hunting and Jiu Jitsu. And so, like, we talk all the time. His mother passed away last year. And this is where, like, your little group comes back together, like, to support each other. So I saw another buddy who was in my wedding, and he showed up to the funeral, and, we got to catch up. And I could call that guy right now. I'm like, hey, I need to see you. He's like, okay, when and where? And I think we need that. We need that sense of community, camaraderie, brotherhood. Um, I enjoyed it in the Marines. I enjoyed it in the fraternity. I enjoy it with jujitsu with those guys, and I enjoy it with my little group that I stay in touch with. Um, we need that as men, and it makes me a better lawyer. It makes me a better friend. It makes me a better husband and a better father. And the more we can rely on one another, the more success we're going to have. And I got to tell you, man, having success with a friend is so much better than having success by yourself. And people don't understand that. It's like people tell you all the time, you don't understand what having a kid is like until you have a kid. And they're absolutely right. It's life altering. It changes the way you look at everything. It changes the way you think about everything. And your joys are so much better because it's not about you anymore. It's about everything else. And I was telling you that hunting story before we went live about my son shooting that red stag in Patagonia. And I was excited. I was stoked over that. My son was like, ah. I'm like, yeah, buddy, but you did this. Like, you did this. I'm so excited for you. And yeah, that's what it's like having your own tribe and helping your tribe out. And you're calling it a brotherhood. I'm just calling it whatever. These are my friends, and these are who I want to spend time and I want to do business with. So, to your listeners, I would say, hey, keep your tribe close, man. Keep your brothers close. Work with them, help them, because it all comes around. I believe in karma. You put out good, you'll get good back. So, yeah, I mean, but I know you've got some other questions you want to ask. So let's get to it, man. What other things you got over there?
I'll go through two more here. And this one is from Steve. Steve says, I'm interested in best corporate tax structures for my home building business in Oregon. Also, the best structure to bring in a partner for individual builds, as well as for a subdivision development. I have both of these coming up.
Yeah. So the way I would approach that is, I would talk to him and like, what is your goal? Is your goal to share profits? Is your goal to just do this deal? Like, is this a long-term play? Do you want a partner for the duration or just on these deals? And then we would look at probably a JV structure, or maybe even a GPLP structure, to put that together. We do have structures in place, and we charge flat fees for these structures because we just do them over and over and over and over again. And it's just a kind of a plug and play. Now, there are some that we have to tweak and make them more bespoke for specific deals. But, to your listener, I would say, hey, you may want to think about a JV structure if it's just a one-off. If it's a long-term play, then I would probably bring in a trust at the top, and then we would create a hold co underneath it, and then we'd set up another management co over to the side where there's a management fee going over to that, and then all sorts of little things that we do to create tax efficiencies to to silo certain projects in the holdco that can then own SPEs, single purpose entities for individual deals. And, you could spin those off, you could sell it, you could, do what you need to do with it, but it provides really good flexibility for the individual, and it creates a shield of liability. Moreover, it's tax efficient. So those are some of the things that we do. Again, I would need to see the specifics, and I'd have a lot more questions than what we're just talking about here. But those are kind of the things that we structure and we do quite a bit of.
Awesome. I'll give you one more, Brian, then we'll let you get going. This one also happens to be from a Brian. He says, curious about the idea of putting all assets in a living trust managed from Cyprus for the below tax benefits, income tax exemption.
Oh, no, I'm going to stop you now. Look, I know about these Cyprus trusts, and don't is what I'll say. Don't. There are other ways we can figure this out, and we're utilizing a lot of trusts created out of Nevada right now, just because of, kind of get you off grid. So you create a trust in Nevada. It's a 365-year trust. It has generation skipping properties to it. We can make you a beneficiary of that. It can then hold a couple of other entities. We can pay you out as an employee, but all your assets go into trust. We'd use Nevada, Wyoming. We'd structure that together. And so you have pure anonymity here. And then you don't own it. All your assets are in it. You're getting the use of those assets, and it's tax efficient to you. We make you an employee of one of the management co's that gets a salary generated from the businesses we have in your holdco, and it does everything you need it to do. People out there talking about Cyprus, stop. Just don't do that. Years ago, it was the Isle of Man. Now it's Cyprus. I've heard of other people talking about, America Samoa. I've heard people talk about South Africa. Like, guys, look, stop. I mean, just stop. It's not worth it. Like, what do you? Don't. Just don't. There's other things we can do, and we do them all the time. We have a lot of clients that are foreign nationals that come to us for real estate deals. And, they ask us to structure things. We're like, we're not going to Cyprus, man. Just drop that idea right now. We're not doing that. There's a better way to do this. We can do it. And, you don't have to go to Cyprus. We're going to protect your assets. We're going to take care of it. So one of my partners, John, used to work for a very eccentric billionaire. And this is a conversation we can have offline because it's fascinating. But John has a lot of experience dealing with ultra high net worth people because he worked for this billionaire who has this massive empire. And so they had Department of Defense contracts, they had Department of Interior contracts, they had all sorts of things. And we're talking one day, and he's like, well, we could do this because I've seen it work and it's been tested by the courts, and let's do this for this particular client. I'm like, okay. And so we start pulling it apart and putting it together and talking to the client. And it's a very simple structure, and it's here in the States, and you're not going to go to jail. And there's no Burisma money coming, and you're gonna be safe. You're gonna make money. You're gonna be okay. But please, to your listeners, Cyprus, just don't.
You probably wouldn't be surprised at the back channel talk that I hear and these events that we throw events all over the world, and we'll have 50 businessmen together chatting about the different trusts and things that they're doing and all sorts of plans going on.
I know, and as somebody that deals in trusts a lot, and LLCs and corporations and JVs and syndication deals, I will tell you that every time somebody comes to me and they say, well, I've got this offshore structure, and I'm like, how many different countries are we dealing with? And you're like, 16. I'm like, You don't think that looks weird to the IRS? No, that didn't ring a bell. So yeah, I tend to err on the side of simplicity. Like there's a simple way to do a lot of very complex things because the slippage through all these different trusts and all the machinations. Why? Why are you doing that? It doesn't make sense. And there are a lot of things you can do. Now, also people's goals are different, right? Like some want asset protection, some want to just not pay taxes, some want other things. But at the end of the day, this this idea of going to Cyprus or the UAE or any of these places, I'm like, no, no. I mean, just don't do that. Because until you fought with the Department of Justice, they don't have a budget. There is no budget that you could possibly mention to the Department of Justice if the particular case is big enough. Um, who's the Sam Bankman Fried, right? The I don't know what coin he had, but he had a coin. Dude was a billionaire, like 30 billion at one point, and given to all sorts of politicians, and that didn't help him. He's sitting in prison for 20 years. That did not help him. Don't think it'll help you. So I'm just putting that out there. Like let's color in, between the lines, and let's get you something that's going to help you and achieve your goals. But please don't, no Cyprus, no Cyprus.
No shortcuts. Well, I think we're all looking for that quick fix, whether it be our health, relationships.
I was joking with my wife. I'm like, honey, did you see where that OnlyFans star made $43 million last year? I'm like, you may not know it, but you're getting a channel. And so look, there's no shortcut to making it. It's slow and steady, one foot in front of the other, and have good people around you because good people make the travel worth it. And sometimes it's really about the journey and not the destination. You'll get to the destination eventually. We all will. But have good brothers around you, man. Have idea people around you. And I say that every idea is interesting. Every idea has something you can glean from it. Every idea may not be for you. Cyprus, no, that is not for me. It's not for you. It's not for anybody else listening. Don't do Cyprus. But it's an interesting idea.
I love it. One of our master coaches, we have a bunch of them all over the world, is from Cyprus. So I'm going to be giving him a hard time as well. I was joking.
I would definitely give that guy a hard time. Like, what is it about your country, dude? So, no, I mean, look, I've heard about it. I know about it. I've read into it. This has the hallmarks of tax evasion written all over it. And so don't do that. But, I know you've got some other listeners. Throw one more out there and we'll wrap this up.
Sounds good. Let me go through the thread here. This one is similar. So this is from Ryan. Ryan asks, any advice for reporting structure when doing business in the US and Brazil? Should I just keep the companies separate? It said digital marketing and business consulting.
Well, we could do it this way. We could set up a trust and take this for what it's worth. I don't know all the details here, but you set up a trust, you make the trust irrevocable, you contribute the business here in the United States and the business in Brazil into that trust. So now you've domesticated the Brazilian business to the US because now it's owned by the trust. And then did you say his name's Ryan? You make Ryan a beneficiary of the trust. So he's getting paid out. And then the trust will file a report with the IRS on its annual return, which is far more efficient than trying to cobble all this together. So you put it all into the trust and the trust will deal with it. And he still gets all the benefit of all that, but he doesn't have any of the liability anymore and he doesn't have any of the tax exposure.
Love it. Brian, you've been so generous with your time. It's been great chatting with you, man. I love what you're doing. I'm putting online. Let the people listening to this know where they can find your book, and where they can find you.
Okay, guys. So I wrote a book years ago. It's called A Lawyer's Guide to Real Estate Investing. It's what is the name of the book? Lawyers Replace Your Income: A Lawyer's Guide to Finding, Funding, and Managing Your Real Estate. It's on Amazon. It's $19 or whatever. And I did that because I'm heavily involved in real estate. I use real estate all the time, and it's got some good nuggets in there for you. If you want to reach out to me and book a consultation, there's a link in my bio on Instagram, and it links to a Calendly where you can book time with me. I'm on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. If you want to talk about legal representation or me structuring something to you, or even GC in a box that we have here at the firm, reach out. My email address is bboyd@thompsonburton.com. I am here every day unless I'm in court, and then I'm here after court. So if you email me, I'll get it and we can set something up. But look, I just encourage your guys and your listeners out there to, understand there's no shortcut. Keep your brothers with you for the ride. It's so much better. And reach out if you need anything. That's what we're all here for. We're just trying to help each other.
I love it, Brian. Thanks so much for your time, man. I really, really enjoy what you're doing. And gentlemen, as Brian said, keep your brothers close. This is what we're all about here. This is why we're on episode over 900 at this point, and trying to get that information out to you guys. And we do it all the time. And as I always say, in the moment of insight, take massive action. And Brian's given you a ton of insights to go into. And one that's really insightful for a lot of us is don't do your own dentistry, so to speak, right? Use professionals like Brian. We always look for these quick fixes because they sound shiny. And maybe that's the thing in Cyprus or whatever else you're doing. But you got to do the work at the end of the day. So thanks again, Brian. Gentlemen, we'll see you next time on the TPM Show.